You are innovating, you're creating, you're being a creative practitioner right from the word go. You don't have to have all the knowledge to allow you to be creative. It's not like you get to a certain point and you're like, now I'm allowed to be creative. I had to gain all of that knowledge first. Hello everyone and welcome to the How to Harp podcast. It's one of our solo episodes. I'm here all by myself, but I do have my How to Harp hoodie on, and so I don't know, I feel like I've got the whole of How to Harp with me. We're on episode 55 of our How to Harp podcast. Can you believe that? In fact, we've just kind of sailed past our 52nd anniversary, didn't we? Maybe we should have done something for our year special anniversary. So yeah, there you go. We've been going for over a year now. That is crazy. We've had so many lovely guests from professionals, learners, Angela, me on my own. It's been so nice to create it. So I hope you guys are enjoying it. You know, this might be a really good time to say, if you guys want to see anyone in particular on the podcast, or if you want me to cover any topics in particular, then write them in the comments or get in touch, email us, hello@howtoharp.com. And yeah, we'll see what we can do. That was impromptu. I wasn't expecting to say that. But I do have a plan of what I would like to talk about today. I would like to talk to you guys about my learning and teaching philosophy. And it's not something that actually I have ever really articulated a lot before. And to be honest with you, I kind of started, if you guys don't know, we've just ran a big kind of celebrating harmony weekend, which was a big series of free events and lots of fun learning about how to use harmony at the harp. And in one of these sessions, I started talking about my learning and teaching philosophy. And I've never really talked about it before, and I've never really articulated it before. And it wasn't until I came off of that particular live call and I was like, yeah, that really is my philosophy, and that's how everything's been built. And I feel actually really passionate about that. And so off the back of that, I'm like, do you know what? I want to share that with everyone and say, this is how I approach my learning and teaching, and this is what I think is really, really important and I feel super, super passionate about. And when I was thinking about this, I was just driving home from a dog walk thinking about recording this podcast, and I was like, yeah, I'm going to say that, you know, in your learning you should have this, this and this. And I was like, no, actually, I'm not going to say should. I'm not going to say that because I don't like that word should. What I'm going to say is, if you have this, then you're creating a well-rounded learning experience. And that's my philosophy. So I'm going to share this with you. So the first thing I want to do is I want to say that in my years of learning about learning, I've studied a number of different approaches to learning and teaching. And that's not just harp related, music related. I've studied Suzuki teacher training, I've studied Dalcroze, I've studied Kadai, Orff Schulwerk. So I've studied a number of different music approaches to teaching and to learning. But also, I've obviously got a master's in learning and teaching the arts, where we study larger learning and teaching theories such as fixed and growth mindset and racist ripples of reflection and learning and all these kind of things. And I love all of that kind of stuff. I think it's really, really interesting. But unless you can then, I think, having done all that study, which I find fascinating, what's really important about it is using that in what I'm creating. And that's what's really exciting, is actually using it with learners, is learning all about these different ways that we can approach learning and teaching. It's great. It's really great. But the really exciting fun part is employing it into the resources that we make in How to Harp, and seeing people learn and seeing people grow and learning from that and saying, oh, that's interesting. Let's tweak that and let's change that. And you know, learning ourselves. And so yes, I've done a lot of studying, and yes, I've got a lot of experience in teaching and playing the harp. But I'm still learning myself. And I think that's, although that's not in my learning and teaching philosophy, I think that's kind of the foundation of what I believe about learning and teaching, and that is that I am always a learner. Yes, I'm always a learner on the harp. I'm constantly learning and changing and improving and taking a step back and taking 3 steps forward. But I'm also a learner as a tutor and as a teacher and as a coach and as a supporter and as a creator, because in How to Harp we create resources for people to learn from. And I'm still creating things and watching people respond to them and learning from that and changing and growing as a teacher. And that is the foundation to everything that I believe. So I'm going to share with you guys what right now is my learning and teaching philosophy and what I feel passionate and strongly and excited about right now. And I'd like to think that I'm not in 2 years going to come back and be like, actually, it's the polar opposite to that. But I am still learning. And so I think maybe one of the reasons I've been a little bit maybe shy or reticent to say this is what my learning and teaching philosophy is because I'm still learning. And so what that looks like today is going to be different to what it might look like in a week, or it might look like in 6 months, or it might look like in 5 years. It probably is going to be different in 5 years. And so sometimes I think when you put something out there and you say something, it's easy to think that that's you said it and that's you defined. And I think I thought that about my harp for a long time. That's why it took me so long to make an album, and probably why it's still taking me so long to make another album. But yeah, I think that's the foundation of everything, is that I am still a learner. Yes, I'm a teacher, but I'm still learning about that. And that's really important to embrace that. And for me, I think it's very important to always be open to learning new things and trying new things and changing your mind and changing up. That's the first most important foundation. After that, my big teaching philosophy centers around imitation, assimilation, innovation. And I want to make this clear that these aren't terms that I've made up, and even that journey isn't something that is unique to me, because that journey is something that I found from Clark Terry, who's an amazing jazz tutor. But there's some adaptations. So let's talk about those 3 kind of terms. So imitation is a huge part of Suzuki learning and teaching. And it's beautiful. So the Suzuki philosophy is that the way that we learn language, the way we learn our native tongue, is that we are surrounded by it all the time and we begin to imitate, to replicate what we're surrounded by. That's a very simplistic, 10-second description. There's obviously much more to it, but in the base level. And I love that. And I think it's so true. It's actually true of how we learn everything in life, really. It is true of how we learn to talk. We hear those around us talking. At first, we try and imitate and it doesn't come out quite right. This is something that I think is really useful for adult learners, because adult learners tend to expect themselves to be good at something. And I'm going to say we, because I've got a hobby and I'm learning that, and I definitely expect myself to be good at it. And so even though I'm not in that learning phase of the harp anymore, I'm still learning, but I'm not at that phase where I'm like, why am I not better? I should be better than this by now. I do understand that frustration as a beginner, because I am a beginner in dog agility. And I always expect myself to be better. I'm always like, why am I still struggling with this? Why? So I understand that frustration, and I understand what it's like to be a learner. And as many of you know, I do learn new instruments regularly to remind myself of that. So I do understand that feeling. But when we're younger, we don't have those kind of hang-ups. And when children are learning language and they're starting to pronounce words, we just think it's lovely, and they're all encouraged, and they're not told that it's wrong. If someone says, they can't quite pronounce. I remember when I first said my brother's name, Alistair, his name when I was a baby was Asta, because I couldn't say Alistair. And nobody said to me, no, it is not Asta. that is incorrect. Say it right. It's Alistair. You know, it was just like, yeah, that's right. It's Asta. And you were encouraged. And later on, you managed to get more of it. And that's imitation. That is listening to what's going on around you, trying to imitate that sound, and being encouraged to continue on that imitation journey. It's how we learn everything. It's how we learn our language. It's how we learn, you know, what food we like. We imitate those around us. We eat the same as what is around us. We have a taste of what's going on around us. It's how we decide what dress we like. It's how we learn our instruments. We imitate the video that's in front of us, the teacher that's in front of us. We're imitating. And that's a beautiful way of learning. You don't have to be learning by ear and literally imitating in order to be imitating, because you're still imitating what's come before. You're still imitating what was on the sheet music. That is a process in learning. And I love that. And I learned lots about that in Suzuki teacher training. And then Clark Terry says you then have assimilation. So you then assimilate that knowledge. You spend time soaking in that knowledge. And this is another point where, as adult learners, we can be quite bad. Quite bad's not, that's terrible to say, isn't it? We can feel frustration because we don't want to spend time assimilating. We expect that once we have imitated something, we should be able to replicate that time and time again. That's not the case. The assimilation phase is super important. And, you know, we see it quite often in How to Harp. We've got learning pathways that are long to take. You know, our beginner and our post-beginner learning pathways, they are designed to take at least a year to complete. And the idea that you could move from beginner to post-beginner in any less than a year is like, you're gonna have gaps. You have to allow yourself to assimilate. You have to allow yourself to practice in that space and allow those skills to like mature in that space before you move on and start imitating other things. You have to spend that time assimilating and allowing it to all, I keep on wanting to say fester. That's definitely not the term I want to use. You want to allow it to all like settle in, filter in, like osmosis into your body through that assimilation stage. And quite often you're playing pieces that are a similar standard, but you're still actually developing the skills that you're learning. You're bedding them in. That's a good word. You're bedding those skills in through the assimilation stage. Super important. And Clark Terry says then you're ready for innovation, which is where you've followed and you've assimilated. And he's talking about learning about improvisation here, by the way. You've imitated, you've assimilated, you've soaked it all in, and then one day you say, and this is a quote, one day you say, I've followed. Oh, they're going right here. What happens if I go left? And at that point, you're improvising or you're innovating. I love that. And I think that's so true. You know, you follow along and then you start to question, well, do I actually like that? Do I not like that? What do I not like about it? What could I do instead? Again, same with when you're learning to eat. You taste that. Do I like the taste? Do I not like the taste? You taste it again a few years later. Like me and Willie used to hate olives. I still hate olives. But we had a holiday in Morocco, and every table we went to, this is many years ago, every table we went to, every bar we went into, every place we went to, we got a little free bowl of olives. And of course, I was like, look, I don't like olives. I'm not eating them. And Willie's like, they're free. I'm going to train myself to like olives. And also, apparently olives are really good for you. And apparently they taste really nice. And Willie like kept on tasting the olives. And eventually he started to like the olives. He assimilated the taste for olives. My point is that you change, you grow, you question, why do I like this? Do I not like this? It's all part of that process. And in music, of course, that is when you innovate. I've done this. What happens if I now do this? Then you're innovating. And all those parts, I believe passionately, are part of learning and teaching. And if you have them part of your learning and teaching, it's going to give you a pathway to success. But I don't believe it's as simple as you start with imitation, then you move to assimilation and you bed in that knowledge, and then you start to innovate. I think that this is more of a Venn diagram, and these three things are happening at any part of your learning journey, right from the very start. These three things are happening. Or if these three things can happen as part of a learning journey, you're going to have a really great, well-rounded experience. And that is my teaching philosophy, big time. Why? It's because as you're imitating, continuing to learn repertoire and allowing that to assimilate, right? You're imitating, you're taking things in, and you're allowing it to bed in. And at the same time as those are happening together, you're also spending a bit of time asking, why do I like this? Why do I not like that? Now, you might not be at that point changing things. You might be looking at your music and saying, okay, well, I'm learning this piece. I don't really like this bar. And at that point, even if you don't change the bar, you're asking, why do I not like this bar? What is it about it? I have to learn a bit about theory, or I have to learn a bit about harmony to work out what it is about this. Or even better, I love this passage. What is it about this passage that I love so much? And you don't need any, theoretical knowledge to ask yourself, what is it about this passage that I love so much? You can ask yourself that and think, it could be the rhythm, it could be the phrasing or the feel, it could be the harmony, it could be, the texture that's being created. And once you've pinpointed what it is that you love about it, then you can kind of hone your learning and say, okay, I really like the texture that's happening in this passage. I'm going to point my learning towards that, and I'm going to learn more about texture on the harp and how I can create different textures on the harp and what that means. And so you're then innovating within your own learning, and you're creating pathways for yourself. So you're going to go down that pathway, and you're going to imitate and you're going to assimilate. And as you go down that pathway and ask those questions about what do I like, what do I not like, why, you're going to create a whole bunch of other pathways. Let me be really clear. I'm not suggesting that we all become magpies and start learning lots of, as soon as you hear some different piece of music that you like, you should grab that and start learning that instead. What I'm saying is when you're working on your piece or on your skill, you're asking yourself, what do I like? What do I not like? And why? And then you're focusing small parts of your learning at certain areas. And that, I think, is really exciting. That's what I get really passionate about. That is my teaching philosophy. It is the Venn diagram of imitate, assimilate, and innovate happening all at the one time. And that is how we've designed How to Harp. As best we can. We're still learning. We've got big plans, by the way. We're chatting about them now. I'm very excited about them. They'll be coming soon, probably at the start of 2027. And of course, right now, we have our harmony courses on sale. And they've also been designed, the 4 levels, with this teaching philosophy in mind. Levels 1 and 2, where you're really learning and you're doing lots of imitating, but you're still asking yourself, how does this chord make me feel? Why do I like this one? What direction do I want to go in? And right from level 1, you're arranging a tune. You are innovating, you're creating, you're being a creative practitioner right from the word go. You don't have to have all the knowledge to allow you to be creative. It's not like you get to a certain point and you're like, now I'm allowed to be creative. I had to gain all of that knowledge first. But similarly, if you try and do lots of creative stuff without the knowledge, it's really, if you've done something you like, it's very hard to then recreate that because you're not really sure what you've done. If you're able to do something you really like and then say, I've done this with my rhythm theory, or I've done this with my harmony, or I've done this with my texture, it's much easier for you to recreate that in more of your pieces and to understand what you're actually doing. And that's why it's got to be all of it together, not waiting till you know everything to be creative. Also, if you wait till you know everything to be innovative and to be creative, I think sometimes the rules hold you back because you've learned things that maybe people have said you should do this and you can't do that, and it could be this. If you've learnt Baroque harmony, there's lots of rules there that you have to follow. Doesn't mean you have to use Baroque harmony now. So it's a journey, but it's a journey of those three things moving with you as you go through that learning and teaching journey, not moving through the three sections. That's what I believe, and that's what I'm really passionate about. Hope you guys enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed putting it into words. It's the first time I've ever done it, put it really into words like that and spoken about it. And yeah, I feel really passionate about it. So I hope some of you connected with that. Well, thank you everyone for sitting in with me and listening to me chat all about my teaching and learning philosophy. I really enjoyed sitting down and chatting about that. Now, next week, I am joined, I have company. You'll all be pleased to know it's not just me next week. I'm joined by the wonderful Scottish harpist, Rachel Groves. She has just won the Young Traditional Musician of the Year. Congratulations. She's the first harpist to win this competition. And yeah, we're really delighted for her. The whole of the harp world, I think, has been like, yeah, go Rachel. So I'm really excited to be welcoming her into the How to Harp membership as the next guest artist. And of course, onto the podcast to tell us all about her life, her musical journey, all of her studies, which are very interesting. And of course, how she got in that competition and how it all felt from her end, becoming the Young Traditional Musician of the Year 2026. So, as ever guys, if you have enjoyed this podcast, please do like, subscribe, share it with another harpist, leave us a comment. It really does help us. And I look forward to seeing you all and Rachel next week.